Now, when it comes to the political leadership in Nigeria, well, for the human rights activist, journalist, and former presidential candidate Omoyele Sowore, it's no use mincing words, is it? Incompetent, corrupt, unprofessional, and endlessly, infinitely self-centered are among the kinder ones. Mr. Sowore says that as a result, Nigeria has been moving backwards and nothing and no one seems able to change its course. According to him, and I'm paraphrasing here, it's getting to the point where you'd have to be an idiot to believe that this country will somehow grow and prosper under the current crop of barely literate, unimaginably corrupt, self-serving politicians. And yet, the few civil society groups and citizens like Mr. Sowore continue to fight and claw and raise hell in a country where no political leader appears to be listening. So as the pressure cranks up, is the country on the verge of blowing a gasket, as he suggests? Well, before we get to all that, take a brief look at this video of the latest clash between Mr. Sowore and security operatives in Abuja.
Good morning, how are you? Say, why are you shouting? Who is that? Do I look like a Yabelo to you? I beg, go and sit down. Go and sit down. Hey, what's that? What's that? What's that? What's that? Yes.
I'm a police officer.
So what?
Come out.
I'm not coming out.
Who are you? Can I know you?
I have a business in court.
Okay, please.
No, I'm not coming out. I'm not coming out. You can't clear me. You are not an officer of the court.
Hello, sir.
You are an EFCC officer.
Hello, sir.
You have no business standing in front of the court.
I'm talking to you now.
So why is he
morning,
jumping
sir.
at me?
Hello, good morning, sir.
Yes.
Please, what can I do for
This
you?
is a federal high court.
Yes, you are
Bring
right.
a court official. I'll talk to the person.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm a policeman.
Oh, you have a senior.
First before a court
How are you?
talking to.
You are not a court official.
It's okay.
You are allowed EFCC to be flying at people in court. That's what the nonsense the DSS does here too. It's not taking it easy now.
Welcome, sir. Welcome.
They are the ones who bring us to court. EFCC for that matter. Yes.
This issue that happened last time, it doesn't.
There's no issue. I have a court case. Please. Leave the road. Hey, don't touch me. Don't touch me.
I'll restrict you.
You can't restrict me. You can't. No.
Give it to me.
There's no order given to you that can prevent me from going to. You can't. Don't touch me.
Call your lawyer.
Don't touch me.
Know the case you are going to.
No, I'm not going to call anybody to tell you a case I have. No, you have no right. You have no right to prevent me from attending to my case at the Federal High Court. You don't have any right to stay in front of the Federal High Court, regardless of who you are.
Which case do you have?
I'm not going to tell you my case. You are not my lawyer. You are not my lawyer.
Sir, you are free.
Stop your foolishness. You are not my lawyer.
Well, quite extraordinary, isn't it? Even a little bit entertaining, if I might say so myself. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the human rights activist, journalist, founder of the US-based news website Sahara Reporter, and former presidential candidate Omoyele Sowore. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you for that.
You're all right, though, aren't you? I mean,
well, I'm always
nobody
all right.
punched you in the face or anything, because that is something that will not be countenanced.
Well, I expect the worst and hope for the best when I'm relating with Nigerian officials, especially security agents. So.
Well, in this case, we certainly hope for the best, and it does appear as though it ended well. But just tell us what was happening in that video and the context in which it happened.
Well, for me, it has to do with access to justice. And that is to say that everybody who wants to get justice in Nigeria goes to court, or they are brought to court. In my own case, I was brought to court 2 weeks ago by the police. And prior to that period...
Why were you brought to court?
Because I called the IG of police illegal, that his tenure has expired.
So they were not amused?
They were not amused, and they reached out to me to drop that particular position, and I said no, he should retire because he has already completed his tenure after 35 years in service and 60 years of age. That was September 4, 2024. And that campaign started even before his tenure supposedly was extended, so I didn't stop. And so when they brought me to court, they asked me to drop my passport. So we filed a motion I was going back to court to get a date so that I could get my passport back. So they always target my passport.
I was going to say that passport that was held for a long period of time, you got it back, you were able to travel, it's been taken again.
They've taken it from me again 2 weeks ago. So, and that was what took me to court. But upon approaching the gate of the Federal High Court, I saw huge security cordon, and I did ask what the issue was. And they said they have a former governor of Kogi, said Yaya Bello, on trial. And I said, how's that a problem? You've caught a thief and you have him under your control. He's on trial. Why harass the rest of us? We have business in court.
Well, he hasn't been found guilty, though,
well,
so it's not a good idea to call him a thief.
Well, that's why they took him
to court. He's alleged to be a thief.
They accuse him of stealing 80 billion naira.
He's accused of it, but he hasn't been found guilty yet.
Yeah. So we were there for that purpose. But I have witnessed over time, in the last 6 years particularly, how the sacrilegious takeover of the court premises, especially by the DSS. I was abducted on the 3rd floor of that Federal High Court by the DSS, fully armed. The judge had to flee. And I'm...
My God.
Yes.
Sounds horrendous.
It was horrendous. So, and they've done it several times. So everybody who has a case that he has interest in court brings their own security to take over the court. Not only do they do that, and this is why I'm surprised that lawyers in this country have not done anything about it. They take over the job of the court officials. They take the cost list from them. The DSS, it could be the lowest official of the DSS. They will take the cost list and be screening lawyers, some of the senior advocates of Nigeria, to go to the Federal High Court. They usually do this with Nnamdi Kanu because they claim he's a security risk. I don't see how that's a problem. And we have suggested to them that since you are not interested in justice or fair trial for Nnamdi Kanu, just set up one of your conference rooms at the DSS headquarters. Get the judge to come there, finish up the job. Don't pretend that you want justice. But if you're going to do it in a civil court, Federal High Court, you have to allow every other person who has business in court to do their business, including, and most importantly, the court officials who are appointed, paid, or elected to man our courts. But this violation has continued for too long, and that was what led to the altercation you saw. And when they realized that I wasn't backing down, of course, common sense prevailed. But for me, it is something that has to end. You cannot just set up court systems, tell people that they can have access to the courtrooms. They are public places. In fact, the court has a gallery where even if you have no business in court, you can sit and just watch proceedings in court. And I usually do that, by the way.
Yeah, of course. You have a right to do that.
For some persons who claim they come from security agencies, paramilitary organizations to take over the court and then start harassing people, it's just something unacceptable. And, I know we have normalized for too long a lot of abnormalities and absurdities in our country. But it gets to a point where you say enough is enough.
Well, I mean, I've seen, obviously this one, it was quite sort of arresting, that video. But I mean, you've had a lot of altercations with, these soldiers and police and all the rest of it.
In fact, during Buhari's regime, policemen would bring thugs from town to come beat us up when we tried to attend Nnamdi Kanu's trial. My car was broken into, I was attacked physically several times on camera. So, but after Buhari left, I think they changed tactics.
I mean, you must have a very strong constitution to keep going up against these people in spite of the apparent attempt on several occasions to break your spirit.
Well, I don't have any other country other than Nigeria. I've traveled maybe extensively. That's why I'd never changed my citizenship. I just think we must make this place a better place for its citizens, our brothers, sisters, and compatriots, and that we shouldn't live as slaves in our own country. And that's a conviction that I never give up on. And it has lasted as long as Babangida has been gone.
Well, we're going to come to Babangida in a minute,
my activism
because I know he's been one of your
I started activism
pet talking points
under his regime, we've consistently just challenged these people. I've been through some 7 presidents in my lifetime. I think this is the 8th person.
But we're going to come to IBB sort of Babangida shortly. But I mean, in all these cases, has your respect for the Nigerian judiciary increased or lessened?
Oh, completely eroded. There's no way I can have respect for a judicial system that denigrates me, that denies me of access to even basic justice. I was tried for 5 years between 2019 and 2024 when I was eventually let go. And my passport was seized, I was restricted to Abuja, my brother died, I couldn't see my family for 5 years. These guys woke up one day, came to court and said, well, they didn't even say we're sorry, they said, oh, we want to discontinue the trial.
I read somewhere that you once said, I mean, and you were being paraphrased, that fair trials no longer exist and that justice is whatever the government and its agencies deem it to be, and that the presumption of innocence is now the presumption of guilt. Has your experience borne that out, or were you being misquoted or speaking in just broad terms?
I was almost quoted. That's the life I've lived. Way back, from as far back as my university days, where I was expelled twice without trial. I was incarcerated several times. I was taken to magistrates in Lagos. I remember in 1990 where we had the protest at the Nuga Games. And our lawyer, Ebuade Borowa, SAN now, stood up to the magistrate and said, the charges are incompetent. And the magistrate looked at the book and discovered that you cannot breach public peace at a stadium. That's what the law says. He looked at us and said, well, even if the charges are incompetent, I have to hold these guys until the games are over. And he detained us for 2 weeks. Just like that. And I've had several of those and I think what they do to people like us is because they will never have enough evidence to have any kind of trial. They obtain the punishment in advance so that they know that the trial will fall apart anyways. But you would have had your time wasted, you would have been incarcerated unjustly, you would have had all kinds of atrocities committed against you. So they will get away with the punishment while you walk away with the wounds.
And has all that sort of given you much more flintiness and sort of selfless bravery and determination? Because you certainly come across that way. Or has your spirit in any way been broken or certainly dampened by all this?
No, I think very early in life I had taken into consideration that I was doing something that would attract lots and lots of consequences. I read books about it. I had some kind of training, not physical training, but intellectual and ideological training from the likes of Femi Falana and those we met early in life. And they had kind of equipped us with the expectations of things to happen, things that could come. But I must also admit that I was not thinking after 1993, for instance, or after the military left, that I would be languishing in detention for expressing myself about an IGP of police. Because even the IGP of police under the military couldn't detain us based on things we said that they didn't like. Interestingly, because there's a rule, I think it's Rule 365 in the police order book, that says police officers cannot use their offices, they can abuse their offices to prosecute people on behalf of themselves. That's the rule.
So in a sense, military rule might have gone, but the practice of the kind of, if you like, the culture of official domination remains.
Let's call it impunity, has gotten worse. And you saw that in August of 2024 when underage kids were arrested, detained for months, and tried for treason until it became a national embarrassment. I was saying an international embarrassment. That was when they were released and immediately rehabilitated, according to them. Under the military, no kids, underage kids, were ever arrested and tried for treason. Even students, they were careful with us. They were careful with youth corpers. But I think those boundaries have become very blunt now. Nobody cares anymore. They just do what they like to break anybody who stands up. And there are more draconian laws now that gags free speech than there was probably under military rule, because that's what's pretty much the Cybercrime Act is all about. It's another Decree 2 or Decree 4, one of those decrees that used to violate free speech and freedom of association, freedom of the press.
Right.
Those things have evaporated under the so-called civilian regime that we're in now.
And yet,
Yes.
in spite of all of that, you have continued, as we talked about, you sort of giving you an element of flintiness in your character. But I mean, you have a brand. You're a businessman. You're a journalist. You were a presidential candidate, so to that extent you could be said to be a politician who has some kind of a brand. I wonder whether all this has affected that brand for good or for ill.
No, every other thing I became wasn't what I set out to be. I think the only thing I set out to be was a human being. Born in Nigeria and raised in Nigeria.
Well, you don't actually set out to be
I wasn't.
You don't really have much of a choice.
See, the year I was to leave the university was 1993, and we were just a few days from examination when June 12th occurred. So I was already thinking about how to find a job, go do NYC.
Normal stuff.
I wanted to live a normal life. But that normal life did not come until almost 20 years later. So, becoming the businessman, as you refer to it, I guess is because of Sowore Reporters. Sowore Reporters was also by accident. I was just very, very angry that I wasn't getting enough news after I come back from work in the U.S. that kind of suit my temperament. I wanted to hear more about development democratically, and it wasn't happening. And then the internet came, and I found some guys who were doing indie media, reporting news on their own. That is where the name Report Yourself came from, as a tagline for Sowore Reporters. And then I started writing. I was a geography graduate, never went to journalism school before. So that's why I used to call myself a citizen reporter. And then it grew, and it became a big brand, and a globally recognized brand. And still tomorrow, I'm the most reluctant person in that sector. I'm not trying to make money off of it. But I like the idea that the brand is there, it's well established, and it's able to run by itself. Because one of the things they wanted to do in 2019 was actually to thinking that I was in possession of the passwords to the website. The DSS wanted to delete the website the night I was arrested, only to find out that I no longer run the website, and they were pretty upset.
Let's turn to one of the topics that you've been tweeting about, and that is the sort of the autobiography of Nigeria's former military ruler, General Ibrahim Babangida. I presume you've read the book, or at least glanced through it, because you've been talking about it quite a lot. I mean, what are the bits that stood out for you?
When you know Babangida very well, and when I did my literary investigation about what the book was about, I also found out the guys who were writing the book. They're based in Lagos, but I'm not going to mention their names now. I already knew what they were doing, and this was to punish his image. So nothing in my view stood out. He accepts that he was the Babangida that he has always been, a Maradona, a dribbler, and he did a fantastic job of, butting heads, as he usually is a very divisive character. And then he arrived at his final goal, which was to tell some of the biggest lies available that he felt the country could clap for.
What were these lies?
The fact that he wasn't the one who annulled June 12th. He did. In fact, Babangida never wanted elections. he wanted to transmute from a military head of state to a civilian head of state. Every other thing he was doing between 1990 when we started getting...
Well, that was the rumor at the
time. It wasn't a rumor because you see, I'm sitting here as one of the students who was expelled in 1992 after we organized Babangida Must Go. So there wasn't a rumor. They reached out to us and said, if you won't let this man become a civilian president, you are not coming back to the university, and they expelled us after we were arrested.
Yeah, but he never came back as a civilian president.
Well, he then created a diarchy after that period. That was how they had an interim government. Not the last interim government. There was a government that he created. He also created the National Assembly.
Yeah, but I'm not trying
in which some people were supposedly elected.
I'm not trying to defend him.
I know you're not.
But I mean, I traveled to Nigeria at the time as an international correspondent, and the impression that was given was that this was part of a process of transition.
No, there was no transition. He didn't have any plan to transition Nigeria to democracy. We forced him to do so eventually. And by the time he did, the damage had been done. So you're asking me what stood out in the book? Nothing, except that for those who weren't born or who didn't know about him, this might sound strange to them that he actually came and was a little contrite. You know, he finally said, oh, you know, the June 12 election was free and fair. We knew that 32 years ago.
Yeah, but he said,
yes,
which is what really stood out for a lot of people, that he confirmed for the first time, really, that Moshood Abiola did win that presidential election.
No, he didn't need to say that. We knew that.
He was a president of Nigeria.
We knew that already as of 1993, June 1993, after June 12, we knew that. I personally interviewed Professor
Humphrey
Wosu in New York, and it's on the internet, it's on YouTube. And he admitted, he said they knew, everybody knew that Abiola won the election.
Well, obviously he did know, but I mean, he didn't say it at the time. Now he's saying.
Because now it is lucrative. He wanted to use it to raise money for a presidential library,
right,
which is a scam because he was never a Nigerian president. So how can somebody who was not elected?
Well, he was a military head of state.
That's
and again, we're not defending
self-styled
him, but he was a
state.
military head of state,
yeah,
and the whole point of a library is to try and keep historical records.
But people who are accidents of history have no right to keep records that have been.
Well, they have a
distorted.
right to keep records.
No,
you may not necessarily. I mean, it's your prerogative if you don't want to go to the library.
No.
But I mean, that doesn't stop
I don't
him
even think it's building a library.
library.
I don't even think it's building a library. But I hope he is building something that we can convert to what former President Jonathan said we should do: a hall of shame for all of them.
A very quick question before we have to go. I mean, we've seen lots of moves going on as people try to position themselves strategically as the 2027 presidential elections approach. I mean, you ran for president in 2023. Are you planning to enter the political fray again in 2027?
I have answered this question on your show before, that I am not one of the people who calendarizes their interest in Nigeria in election circles. I saw one of them on your show yesterday. You know, he has suddenly become.
I like that.
I has suddenly become an activist after being in Kaduna for 8 years. And by the way, he needs to confess also to us, where is Daddy Yatta? The young man who was abducted the same night I was abducted. He was abducted in Kaduna. Same night I was abducted by DSS in Lagos. Nobody has found him since then. So tell him he should come and make a confession about his whereabouts. But to answer your question, I am not in that league of people, you know, all these emergency activists who suddenly discover Nigeria is not good because election periods are coming. No. Our goal, and I speak for myself and those who I've worked with over these years, who take the risk that you described earlier, is to liberate this country. And those ones it's not a dot on a calendar. It's something that we are committed to at every hour, day and night. So if we have any other messages or updates to give you, of course, we will reach out to you.
Indeed.
Yes.
And I want to commend you for your bravery and your continued good governance campaigning. Omoyele Sowore is a human rights activist, journalist, founder of the US-based news website Sahara Reporter, and former presidential candidate. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.